Okay, good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome. My name is Fergus Dolan. I'm the Literacies Development Worker with NALA. That's the National Adult Literacy Agency. We're delighted to have you here today to our webinar on literacy in the workplace is everybody's business. So I'm just going to go through one or two quick slides and then I'll introduce each speaker as we go along. So just a little bit about NALA. NALA is a charity. It's a not-for-profit that's funded 95% by SOLAS. We get in a little bit of extra funding from plain English work. We plain English documents or websites or do plain English training. But and so NALA lobbies on behalf of people with reading and writing difficulties, adults, language difficulties, and we work in conjunction with education and training boards. So all around the country, there are 16 education and training boards. They're in every county, every big town, and they provide the reading, writing, numeracy, and English language classes for adults who need help in those areas. They're generally free, the classes. So that's just a little bit of an outline. So just on today's webinar, what's going to happen is first, there'll be a little bit from me and mainly from my colleague Tina Byrne on literacy, numeracy, and digital literacy in the workplace, some statistics and some research that Tina carried out. Then I'm going to interview Joanne Power. Joanne is the Skills for Work coordinator in Waterford and Wexford Education Training Board. I'm going to interview her about Skills for Work model. What is Skills for Work? How do you get involved in it? What does it entail, etc. And then finally, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Helen Ryan, who's going to give a little bit extra on other options for workplace literacy and numeracy and English language. So thank you. If you go on the next slide, please. So just a little background about literacy. Some of you may know this. If you work with an education training board, you know this, but if you don't, it might be a little bit new to you. So literacy, numeracy, and digital skills in everyday life. What this graphic, it's a bit busy, but what we're trying to show here is that every aspect of our life has literacy, numeracy, and digital skills in it. Every aspect. Just lately, we've seen so much about COVID, and a lot of people in Ireland couldn't register for the COVID jabs because they felt that the HSE was going to ring them and say, okay, Tommy, you're 58, you're due now next week. They just thought they were getting the call. They didn't realize that they had to go online and register. Maybe they didn't have a device. Maybe they didn't have Wi-Fi. Often adult literacy, people who work in adult literacy around the country have told us that some of, especially maybe older men who live alone in rural Ireland, don't know their air code. So it was very difficult to register when you didn't have that kind of access, Wi-Fi, etc. So that's just one example. But anyway, so literacy includes more than just the technical skills of reading and writing. It really has strong personal, social, and economic dimensions, as we'll talk about a little bit. So if you look at the graphic there in the very center, you've got literacy, numeracy, and digital skills. So above it, there's work. A lot of people who have poor literacy skills can't get a promotion. Maybe they're great in a factory on the factory floor, and when they're offered a promotion, they can't take it because they know there'll be form filling or some technology needed. A lot of people can't get a job in the first place. You may be surprised that a lot of people in Ireland don't have a Gmail or an email account. So that was another impediment to registering, say, for the COVID, but it's also an impediment to getting social welfare payments when they go into the entry office. All the jobs to apply for, they're always nearly online. You send in an email, and a lot of people, entry office staff know lots of people don't have an email address, and that's not well known, I suppose. So health and well-being. Helen, my colleague, often does webinars on health literacy, and there's research from the UK and the United States showing that people with poor literacy skills have much slower chance and less chance of recovering from whatever they have. So if you can imagine, you're told you're diabetic or something and you have to check your blood sugars, etc. It's quite complicated. Or if you've got cancer, the medication you have to take at certain times a day, and it's complicated. So without good reading and writing skills, it's very difficult to understand it and take it correctly. So social and community, going out to events, maybe joining the local GA club and helping out, joining the neighborhood resident association. A lot of people don't do it and can't do it because of fears over literacy issues. Family, maybe communicating with family in Australia, Canada, or even another part of Ireland by email or by Skype or by Zoom. You know, certain literacy and digital skills are necessary for that. So if you go over to the farming and agriculture one, there's so many payments from the EU and forms that have to be filled in. You need a degree in ag science to be able to manage a lot of the forms that farmers are expected to fill in. And community and voluntary groups, I mentioned the GA club or the local sports club, or even the school. A lot of people who adults who have literacy difficulties often say to us that when their kid goes to school, they're even afraid to step over the threshold of the yard to go down to there's no way they engage with the principal or the teachers about how their child is doing. So it affects every part of life: climate, the environment, public services, accessing public services, voting. About 25 years ago now, a campaign to have photographs of candidates on the ballot paper. Before that, and even now still, people with literacy difficulties might be afraid to go in and vote because they're not sure of what the situation is inside. Is there a queue? Are there neighbors behind listening? Do you have to write in some stuff? So that's just to show you that literacy affects every element of our lives. Okay, thanks, Aoife. The next slide, please. So actually, if we were here in a training room or in a hotel doing this session, I would have, before showing you this slide, I would have asked for you to shout out what percentage of Irish adults you think are at level 1 of literacy. So level 1 is the lowest level. So to give us some example of level 1 might be something like to read and understand the instructions on the back of a packet of painkillers, so Anadin or Disprin or whatever, Solpadeine. If you cannot read and understand those instructions about how many tablets to take, how many to give to a child, then, for example, you're typically at level 1, the lowest level of literacy. So if you work with an education and training board, or you work in education, adult education, you won't be surprised by these figures, you'll know them. But if you don't, you might be surprised to see that 18% of Irish adults are at or below level 1. That's over 500,000 Irish adults. So if you work in a company in the ag business or whatever, in care, it's probable that quite a few of your employees are at level 1. So they're at the kind of level where they cannot read and understand the instructions on the back of a packet of painkillers. So be aware. Don't think just because you had a good experience in education and did your Leaving Cert and went further perhaps, that everyone is like that. That's not the case. The next slide will show that also. Stronger than that, the next little infographic shows that 25% of Irish adults are at or below level 1 of numeracy. 750,000 Irish adults. So that means 1 in 4 Irish adults struggle with the everyday maths of working at a discount, 20% off, or dividing up a bill between 3 friends. They just struggle with, that's the kind of task that's at level 1, and they can't do that. 1 in 4. So once again, if you're an employer or if you're a trade union organizer, there's a big chance that a lot of your union members or a lot of your employees are at level 1 of maths, where they struggle with basic maths. Okay, so we often hear, oh, great education system in Ireland, but if you look at the last little graphic there, Ireland comes in 17th place in literacy out of 24 countries, and we come in 18th place in numeracy out of 24 countries. Now those countries are mainly Western Europe and, you know, America, Canada, Korea, Japan, but still we've come well down the chart. Okay, next slide please, Aoife. So literacy and work. So this is from 2019 from the Central Statistics Office, and it showed us that there are currently over 400,000 people aged 25 to 64 who have less than QQI, that's Quality and Qualifications Ireland, level 4, so less than Leaving Cert. So it's sure that some of your trade union members or some of the employees who work in your place have less than level 4, less than Leaving Cert. So you may think that everyone is fine on reading and writing in your organization or your company, but maybe not. Okay, next slide there, please, Aoife. So the next slide is Brian O'Donnell. Brian was an adult literacy student from County Carlow, and he worked in a hospital in Carlow, and he was offered a promotion, and this is a little clip explaining his story.
I got as far as my junior cert and went straight into work at 14 and a half. Everything was a challenge, and if there was writing, reading, filling in forms, I found a way of avoiding it, and I have done for 30 years. I'm working in Untitled Hospital for the last 20 years. 2 years ago, an opportunity came up to go on and do this course in UL, and I was picked. When I seen there was a 1,500 word essay, was one part of it, I said, I'm going to need help here now, so you're going to have to face the fear and give yourself the opportunity to learn. So I got in contact with the Adult Learning in Carlow, and great, thanks be to God, they had a class that was going to benefit me through that journey. I'm just even looking back over the last 2 years, and I'm delighted that I have such an opportunity on my doorstep to have a place like this and have an opportunity to learn. I'm putting myself out there a little bit more now. I'm starting to go into certain things in work now. I'm looking forward to challenges now, and where before I would have completely avoided them. It's given me the belief in myself that I can, and the confidence that I have from that is outstanding for me.
If reading, writing, maths or technology is holding you back, take the first step.
Okay, thanks, Aoife. I'm now going to hand you over to my colleague Tina Byrne. Tina is the research officer with NALA, and she's done some research on this. Over to you, Tina.
Thanks, Fergus. Fergus provided an overview there of the statistics in relation to literacy, numeracy and digital skill needs in Ireland. And what I'm going to do now, pretty much like Brian's video there, is to talk a little bit about the people it actually impacts or affects. And that's what this research was about. Next slide, please, Aoife. The research was carried out in 2019, so it was before we were in the situation that we find ourselves in now. And what the research aims to do is to show the benefits to adults of taking part in adult literacy, numeracy and digital skills learning, and the benefit of this learning on all aspects of their life. But in this particular piece, we focused on their work life, but that automatically drags in or tags along with people's personal life as well. And the primary objective is to add to the knowledge base on the benefits of taking part in lifelong learning in Ireland, particularly in relation to the working lives of adult learners, because, you know, we have an awful lot of research in this country on educational disadvantage. However, when it comes to adult literacy skills or needs, we have very little information in that regard. And some of the statistics that Fergus talked about were from PIAC, which is an OECD piece of work. And that's the Programme for the International Assessment of Adult Competency. So that looked across the Irish population at what the level of skills needs were in each of the different categories, including literacy, numeracy, and digital skills. Next slide there, please, Aoife. The approach was, we adopted a mixed method approach, and that was primarily because I was doing a lot of this research with the NALA distance learning service learners. And that by its very definition requires a certain anonymity. People engage a lot of the time in distance learning because they're not at a stage yet where they're either confident enough or feel they're skilled enough to take part in mainstream adult education. And this is a sort of a bridge on the way into doing that. So what we did was we developed an online survey, which was administered to and completed by 22 adults using the NALA distance learning service. Now, where learners could complete the questionnaire themselves, they did, but a lot of the time the learners were helped to complete the questionnaire by the tutors that they work with over the phone. And that was a way of making sure that we were getting relevant and accurate information. I also carried out a focus group discussion with 3 men who were taking part in the Skills for Work programme. Now that programme, the coordinator of the Skills for Work programme will be talking after me, that's Joanne Powers. So she allowed me access to these men who were engaged in the Skills for Work programme because their employer had signed up to the Skills for Work programme. And I did a focus group with Joanne and their employer as part of this research as well. And I'll be showing you some of the findings and the quotes from this research as we moved on. I also did an individual interview with a distance learning service learner. And I think you'll find her story really interesting and heartfelt as well. And it gives you an insight into some of the difficulties that employees, learners, workers, adults in general have in terms of addressing, acknowledging and being confident enough to talk about the fact that they do have literacy, numeracy and digital skills needs. But that requires a certain amount of confidence to be able to do that, because you know, stigma and shame and embarrassment are still significant barriers to adults in terms of them, you know, reaching out or asking for help. And I think we always need to keep that in the back of our minds. You know, people say, oh, sure, we know that. But if it's ongoing, it's still a need and it still needs to be addressed. And it's something we always need to keep to the forefront of our minds when we're dealing with adults who may have literacy, numeracy, or digital skills need. Thanks, Aoife. Next slide, please. So what I'll do first is talk you through some of the findings from the online survey. And most of the survey respondents were aged between 45 and 54 years of age. It was about 59%. And over half had completed lower secondary education. So that's about 51% of the people who completed the survey had lower secondary education. A further 25% had primary school education only. And slightly more men, again, 59%, took part in the survey than women. And the main findings were the predominant reason for joining the distance learning service was to help upskill for a job or to help the respondents get a job. So that was their primary motivation for picking up the phone and phoning NALA's distance learning service. Significantly, nearly 60% of the learners reported that their literacy or numeracy need had stopped them going for a job they wanted. And you're back again to the barriers that are involved here, you know, and the fact that people don't always want to come clean, for want of a better phrase, about the fact that they have these needs. They can be embarrassed. Perhaps more significantly, 85% of the learners reported that they turned down a promotion or a training opportunity due to their literacy and numeracy needs, you know, and that's quite startling. You know, the fact that people would be really interested in a promotion or training, but they don't, you know, they stop themselves from putting themselves forward because of the literacy or numeracy need that they may have. And the biggest reported benefit to returning to education was an increase in confidence, particularly in the workplace. And that's significant because an increase in confidence or an increase in self-esteem is often referred to as soft skills. So when you upskill, you know, and you go up a level, which are your reading, your writing, your numbers, whatever it might be, they're referred to as hard skills. And the more human side of it, I suppose, like the personal development, the confidence and the self-esteem are referred to as soft skills. I don't think there's anything soft about them, and I don't particularly like the term, you know, and as one learner said to me, without that increase in confidence, I wouldn't have gone forward. The self-confidence, she said, was the engine that pushed her forward to be able to do bigger and better things that she wanted to do. Next slide, please, Aoife. So this is some of the things that the learner said in relation to why and how they do what they do. The lack of education holds me back, a lack of confidence and not being able to fill in forms properly. I think Brian talked about that a little bit in his video as well. You know, something as simple as filling in a form. You know, we think, oh, no big deal, you get it done. But, you know, if you search your mind, you may have come across people who, if you handed them a form to fill in, would have said, I forgot my glasses. I don't have my glasses with me. Can you talk me through this? You know, and that's like one of the strategies that people use to disguise the fact that they may have literacy difficulties. You know, I get a complete block every time I'm asked to write about something in work. No problem with figures. But the minute I have to write something, I shut down. Not being able to read and write held me back. Any job that involved reading, I wouldn't even think about doing. So there immediately there's that barrier there about advancement or promotion or training. And then there's the feeling, yes, I can learn, I can change my life for the better. The main benefit has been confidence, having control of my life, taking my place in the world, feeling I'm worth it. I really appreciate the help I've received. The challenge has been fantastic. Next slide, please, Aoife. And again, This is more of what the learners are saying. I don't want to go through them all because you can read them yourselves, and we'll pass on this presentation to you. But I just think it's really important that we acknowledge, you know, the fact that people have skills. It's just that they feel that the lack of literacy and numeracy skills holds them back. You know, like this woman says, I'm really good at listening, but due to a lack of literacy skills, I felt I wasn't able to go for a counsellor job or working with kids in school. That's what she really wanted to do. And she'd drop off courses, you know, because she didn't feel she was quite up to it, you know, or it might be helping this man prepare to go back to work. The lack of education has held him back, and the over-the-phone learning has helped. It's changing his life. He's very happy with what he's doing. Next slide, please, Aoife. And then I, as I mentioned to you earlier on, I did an individual interview with one of the learners, and her case was really, really interesting. She is an early school leaver, and all her working life has worked in factories. Her dream job, she told me, was to work in an office. And I'm a woman of a certain age, and any woman of a certain age who might come from a working class background know that the aim was to work in an office. That's what you strived for. That was the achievement. You were successful if you did that. But she felt she didn't have the necessary skills to be able to do that. So she worked on a factory floor all her working life. She came to a certain age and she could no longer do that because she had problems with her legs from constantly standing at a conveyor belt or whatever it might be. So she handed in her notice. Her employer recognized her as a really hard worker and said, what do we need to do to be able to keep you here? And she said, she didn't really know. So they said, well, we put you up in the office and you can answer the phone. She said, I'm fine answering the phone, but don't ask me to write anything down. Anyway, look, in the hill of the hunt, what she did was she took part in the NALA distance learning service to improve her spelling, and at the same time took a computer course to help her digital skills. And she felt the positive impact of that. So what happened to her was it reinforced the importance to her of updating her skills and the belief that anything is possible, regardless of age, background, educational attainment, whatever it might be. And when we were finishing the interview, she said to me, she wanted to send a clear message to employers to take into consideration skills that are beyond those provided by an educational qualification. So to look beyond the educational qualifications on a CV, you know, and look at people's work history, you know, the hard work, the perseverance, and the will to succeed. So within the workplace or taking on new workers, it's to look beyond what's written down on a piece of paper or what people have gained in terms of academic qualifications. Next slide, please, Aoife. And as I mentioned earlier, I then went to Waterford to talk to an employer and some employees who are taking part in a Skills for Work programme. And the employer reported that there's many benefits to him and his company from its participation in that programme. And primary among them is that a significant number of the workforce are now familiar with technology, because what happened was the men that I spoke to, they were all signed up to computer courses. So that's where they felt their greatest need was. He felt the employees had increased their technical skills as part of the programme, and the employer had also noticed an increase in their overall confidence. And there we are again, it's back to confidence. It's back to an increase in self-esteem. The Skills for Work programme had provided some workers with an opportunity to return to education that they may not otherwise have had or availed of. And the employees report that they're more adept and confident at using technology now on the factory floor. Next slide, please, Eva. So the employer acknowledges the benefits of the engaging in the programme to the company, to him and the company. He said that he pushes his employees to engage in continual professional development. And in large part, this is due to the changing nature of the work environment, including the introduction of new software. He feels a duty of care to his workers and encourages constant training to keep them employable. You know, he says they're clever guys, some of the best workers you can get. So we're doing all we can to encourage them. you know, and them taking part in a computer course is one way of doing this. And the company benefits because all of the new equipment is PC driven. And prior to taking part in the course, a lot of the employees were not comfortable with technology. They didn't know how to use a computer. So now they're becoming more and more familiar with new technologies and taking on more responsibility in terms of using that technology in the workplace. Next slide, please, Eva. The computer course that they engaged in was a 10-week course, and it usually runs once a week for 2 hours. But because the men do shift work, they can only attend once every 2 weeks. And this is a problem when people who take part in the Skills for Work program do it outside of working hours. If it could be part of their working hours, they would be able to go more often, avail more of it. But it's a huge commitment to any worker, particularly those on long shifts. So you're coming off a 12-hour shift and you have to go and do a 2-hour computer program. You know, it's a significant commitment, and not everybody, you know, it has the time to be able to do that if you're trying to balance work home, you know, environments. And the employer acknowledges that the duration of the program and the commitment to it can take a toll on workers, as the men do the learning on their own time rather than company time. And I think that's something we really need to look at, you know, workplace basic education. Do it as part of the working day if and when and where possible. And it's a big ask of employees, and therefore he checks in with them regularly to find out how things are going and if they're attending the course regularly. Next slide, please, Eva. And again, this is what some of the learners said. I'd rather do more of it like every week, but you can't because of the roster. We go on our roster day off, so it's their time off, their time with the family. It'd be good to be able to do it during working hours and have your day off to yourself, but it doesn't work out that way. Next slide, please, Eva. And then the benefits to the employees is it makes me think one day I could be a supervisor. And sometimes when my supervisor has a day off, I fill in for him. And that's when I get to use the skills I've learned. Like before, I couldn't understand the spreadsheets and the different formulas, but now I do, and I can fill in for when he's not there. And another employee said, it's always going to look good on your CV, isn't it? Like if I was going for an interview and they say, oh, did you do any course? I'd be able to say, yeah, I've done a computer course in spreadsheets. Hopefully I won't be doing an interview anytime soon, but if I do, it'll look good all the same. Next slide, please, Eva. So in terms of the research, that's just giving you a very brief overview of the findings from the research, and you'll be able to download the report. And I think there's a link provided to the report as part of this webinar. But what we need to do is we need to carry out a large scale research project that builds on the findings, the very small findings from this report. In particular, the role the adult literacy service can play in upskilling and training of people with literacy, numeracy and digital skills needs. We need to map existing workplace education and training to help establish what more needs to be done to support the development of workplace education and training. And although this research was carried out before COVID, the impact of COVID on the Irish economy and the labour market is not fully known, but I think we can all imagine what it's going to be like. And with this in mind, we recommend that SULAS convene an advisory group to include education and employment stakeholders to further drive developments in workplace education and provision. So, Sinead, thank you. Thanks, Aoife.
Okay, thanks very much, Tina. That was great, really insightful and very clear. So thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Joanne Power. Joanne is the Skills for Work Coordinator with Waterford and Wexford Education and Training Board. And I'm going to ask Joanne, she sent me some questions, and I'm going to ask Joanne the questions, and in that way she's going to explain how Skills for Work works. Okay, Joanne, so can you tell me about yourself, the context, and a little about the Skills for Work program itself?
Hi all, it's I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and I was delighted to be asked by NALA to attend this webinar. Ourselves, the ETBs, the Education and Training Boards, and NALA have had many synergies over the past 2 decades, so it's great to come together again. So as Fergus said, I'm the Skills for Work Coordinator for WW, the Waterford and Wexford Education and Training Board. And there are the 16 education and training boards, as you know. So with legislative change back in 2013, what would have been the VECs and the former FOS are now those education and training boards. And I suppose their remit is around providing a comprehensive range of education and training services nationally. So I sit with the services to business team in our training centre, and one of the functions is around employer engagement. So and in terms of setting the context, I suppose in Ireland in 2018 there were over 175,000 enrolments on FET courses, further education and training courses, the ETB courses as such. And yet of the 175,000, 38% or 46,000 had only primary level education or lower secondary education on entry into those courses. So for me, that and you know, from the introduction that Fergus gave and the research that Tina has done, you know, it reiterates the I suppose the difficulties are there for adults with literacy difficulties. So in practice, we can see it on the ground in courses, and that's for those adults who have made that step forward into education and training. But the difficulties are those barriers that Tina alluded to. So we've talked about the practice, but in terms of the policy, we go back to the fact that 1 in 5 European adults struggle with the basic reading, writing, maths, and using digital tools. And we know from that research, again, that Tina noted, the PIAC, the Programme for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies, we know that 18% of Irish adults struggle with the basic tasks. Like Fergus was saying, the reading of the reading and understanding the instructions on a medicine bottle. So it's fairly significant in terms of, I suppose, the indicators that are there for us. And in terms of my role then, I'm targeting, I suppose, those people who may have left school early, who may not have had the opportunities, and whose skills may be out of date. Those people, I suppose, that may have had undiagnosed learning difficulties. You know, so there are many difficulties there, but that are in employment. So these are the people that I am targeting through the Skills for Work programme. So as you can imagine, it is difficult to encourage an adult, and we'll talk about that as we move forward, to come forward to access the courses, like that chap from Carlow. So the Skills for Work programme then, I suppose in terms of its aim, it aims to upgrade the skills, and Tina talked about that in the research. The evidence is there, the increase in the technical skills, but I suppose what I could hear coming out was, you know, and it's the humanistic perspective or the humanistic philosophy of the educator, is the importance of the awareness of lifelong learning and the importance of the development of that confidence and self-efficacy, the development of self-esteem within the learner. And that has a major impact in the workplace, a major impact in terms of not resisting change, you know, being able to put the hand up forward for the role within the workplace or the job that comes up. So when it comes to it, we can provide a range of courses on a flexible basis, addressing the different skill set needs. And the result being then that people who have the right combination of the technical, the vocational, and the core work skills can more easily transfer within the company or within employment. So the basic skills, I suppose, when we're talking about the reality of the courses, what are people coming forward for? We're talking about the communications. We're talking about the basic IT skills, internet and email, computer applications. So the difference though, it could be horticulture, it could be cookery, it could be personal development, but the difference with the courses is the integrating literacy approach. So the expertise is within the literacy service, the people who are teaching have the literacy background, and that integrating literacy approach is the success of the program. It's not the context of just the technical aspect or the vocational side of it, it's the integrating side of it.
Okay. Joanne, then what do you think are the main motivations for adults to return to learning as part of this program?
Okay, I suppose pre-COVID, when I was out in the workplaces quite a lot, and I'm building up a relationship. It could be in the canteen, having the chat. People spoke about their gaps, and filling these gaps in order to move forward, and how these gaps are holding them back and may have held them back for 10 years or 20 years. It's quite emotional, and Tina did talk about that. It's the stigma that's attached to literacy difficulties, and hiding it has been possibly a big part of their lives to date. And it's that, letting it out, and I suppose for them, it's a huge, it's a huge part of their lives. And moving forward in a step-by-step manner, I suppose, and addressing those gaps and building the confidence, is a motivation. But I suppose what they need to feel is they need to feel safe and secure. They do want to improve their jobs prospects, as Tina said, but it's just, how do I do that within a safe and secure environment, non-threatening, aligned to my level? So if I am at according to the national framework of national framework, if I'm at a QQI level 2, I don't want to be sitting in a course that is at a QQI level 4. So I want to know in advance. I want to have an assessment in advance to ensure that I'm not putting myself out there in a course that's at too high a level. So aligning the course, so having that clarity from the outset with the learner that they're going to be in a safe environment, makes the decision to return easier. And if the decision is their own to return as well, even better. If they can chat it out with the Skills for Work coordinator, and I can see from the group here today that there are quite a number of Skills for Work coordinators from the 16 ETBs here. That's our role, chatting that out and ensuring that there's clarity about the process, the assessment, seeing where I'm at and aligning to the level of the course, and aligning to the needs and interests of the employee themselves.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. What do you see are the benefits of accessing skills to work programs for employees?
So I've worked in an adult literacy service for 20 years, and I love to see that confidence lift, because the journey, I can see a huge difference in an adult who has accessed and filled those gaps and can now fulfill their own potential, achieve their goals, and take advantage of the opportunities, move forward step by step, incrementally, and feel the joy of that. There's no doubt that promotional prospects and that practical application, employers want transferability within the workplace, and there's no doubt that that confidence will lead to that, and it opens up the doors, I suppose, to additional opportunities as well.
Okay, thanks. And finally, Joanne, have you any final words on what the benefits are for employers?
Okay, so in terms of employers, I suppose ensuring a skilled and qualified workforce, increase in quality and output, better team performance. There's research out there around, a better health and safety record, increase in retention of employees, increase in staff promotion opportunities, higher productivity, improved core skills. I could even see that from Tina's research with our group in Waterford, our Skills for Work group in Waterford. So they commenced their courses. So the courses are modular. So they commenced those courses in 2019. and quite a high proportion of them are still attending. And they've attended remotely at times, and they've attended on site as well. So I feel that, you know, from chatting to the employer, he feels the benefit of them accessing those courses. And because the courses, I suppose, are modular, they can do 10 weeks. You know, they can access a further 10 weeks and a further 10 weeks, because the modules, the QQI modules are they're modularized. So it means that they can link in and out of them. They can do internet and email, computer applications. Not only can they, okay, so the expectation is not that they're jumping levels, but it's that they're moving between the levels. I feel that the employers can see the benefits of that in terms of, moving, being happier in the workplace, I suppose. But in terms of the employers, the tuition is free of charge. We have set up on site with employers, and we have set up on education and training board sites. We have set up in community centres. So we try to reach out to both rural and urban areas at times that are flexible, mornings, afternoons, evenings, accommodating shift patterns. So with the research cohort there, we were accommodating their shift patterns. So the programs are accredited by QQI. I do feel it's a win-win for both the employer, the employee, and for ourselves who are providing the courses for them. So they say that 9/10 of education is encouragement, and I feel that the level of care in the adult literacy service really is the backbone of the Skills for Work program.
Okay, Joanne, thanks very much. That was a great overview of the Skills for Work program and very clear benefits to both employers and employees. So thanks for that, Joanne.
Thank you, Fergus.
Okay, our final speaker today is my colleague Helen Ryan. Helen is the policy officer with NALA. Over to you, Helen.
Great, Fergus, thank you. And thanks, Aoife, we'll be looking at my 3 slides. So hello, everybody. Lovely to speak to you this afternoon. And I'm going to look at 3 different things now in a minute around supporting literacy for life, and particularly around the workplace. I suppose the first thing to say, and Joanne had mentioned it there, that NALA and the ETBs have been working on this for just over 20 years now. And that really Fergus's statistic earlier on, that over 217,000 people are in the workplace with below leaving cert, really does remind us that there's a lot of people out there that we need to support, and how we can best do that I'm going to look at shortly. And Skills for Work really came about, which was really, it's a really great program, and so important that it's available to both employees and employers out there. Came from work at the very beginning of the 2000s onwards when we were working on this. And I suppose a lot of our NALA's focus in working with employers over the years, and trade unions and students themselves, is trying to find a fit where people can access supports, and particularly in their workplace. And we'll talk about in work time now in a moment. But all of this has come, I suppose, to quite a really good place for us, that the last government, that we hard to believe that the election was sort of only last year, but it was, and we have our programme for government and a commitment to literacy, numeracy and digital literacy, and that our new Minister Harris, is very much in the throes now, the last few weeks, I think, of agreeing a 10-year strategy, which we hope we will see sometime in July, and it will be launched. And we will hope that workplace will be a real focus of that 10-year strategy, because if we really want to eliminate, and this is what we need to look at now, we want to eliminate literacy, numeracy and digital literacy, and get every adult up to speed and comfortable with these skills, then I think the workplace will be a really key focus for that. So Aoife, just thank you. My first slide I'm going to look at is just in summary, and listening to everybody, which was Fergus's, Tina's and Joanne's inputs were great. Let's look at what the employees need, and really what they need. And I think stigma came up again there today, fear came up, and recent research that was done by Solus really highlighted that as an issue. People are not coming back to literacy services, either ringing our phone number or ringing the ETBs or going into a class, because they are embarrassed and they are fearful. So the first thing we need to offer people, and particularly people in the workplace, are clear information and pathways. So let's tell people what's on offer. Let's break down that stigma a little bit, normalize it. You know, there's lots of us out there who struggle with, you know, spellings. Who doesn't use spell check? If any of us are out for a meal and we had to work out a bill, invariably, maybe someone at the table is good at working it in their head, but we'll always reach for the phone, maybe get out your calculator and work it out. And just to try and normalize this and not try and people to feel that it's such a fearful thing, and then obviously offer some supports around that. So let's tell people what's on offer. Let's offer some adult guidance to people. Again, there's a great adult guidance service provided around the country, but that will need more investment and more promotion. We need to assess needs. So let's see where people are at. Joanne mentioned it there. When you go into the workplace and you talk to people, you begin to say to them, what do you want? And let's look at what their gaps are and what they need to learn. And then finally, a learning plan. So often people tend to come back into adult literacy in the ETBs where something's happened in their life. So perhaps their children have just started school and they want to help them with their homework. And perhaps they are looking for a job promotion and they would like to upskill a bit in paperwork. But instead of waiting for somebody to come in when there's this issue that they want to address, let's go find the people, which is what's so great about the workplace program. As Joanne mentioned, before COVID, she could go into workplaces and talk to people, and let's hope that that will return fairly soon. So what's the next thing that employees need after maybe they've worked out there's something on offer? Well, they need some flexible programs and they need accreditation if they choose to do that. And what's a flexible program? Well, it's a mix of everything. So can I get a bit of face-to-face? We've been thrown into the blended and distance options with COVID, but that's not a bad thing. It's positive. It means we can possibly offer more to people. But building on that, trying to offer that, and things like weekend and summer classes. People often say, I want to do work over the summer. It shouldn't stop. Absolutely. Intensive programs. Again, the number of people who've rung us on our free phone line over the years. One gentleman I always remember rang and said, listen, I have a week off now in about a month. So where can I go for that week? And I want to brush up on my spelling and my writing. And it's at the minute, they are things that the services are looking at and how can we do that? But we need to have these conversations around how we deliver and the intensity, and absolutely accreditation, which lots of learners really want. And we need to work with them around, if they're not at that stage yet, we just work with building their skills and their confidence, and then keeping everything where it can eventually go towards a portfolio and they can get some accreditation and recognition for that. The other big issue then with just going on a program, because people can be very time poor. And if you have families or you're working shift work, it'd be very hard to find time to go and do learning. And that's why really the system supports are so important. And in particular for the workplace, and we would advocate this, and we've probably still a way to go, but we would feel that it is really important that employees are able to do a lot of these training courses on work time. And I know within the Skills for Work program, because it's a free program funded through Solace, which is through the government, which is actually through the National Training Fund, really, so we're all paying for it, is that we would ask the employer often then to release the employee. And that works for some employers, absolutely, maybe some bigger employers who can timetable and schedule people to be released. But often we would have feedback from SMEs in particular, there would be small, medium enterprises who would say that they find that extremely difficult. They've only 10 staff. How do I release 1 or 2 people? It throws it up. So we need to have a discussion around this. How can we have targeted paid learning leave, particularly for small, medium enterprises or maybe community and voluntary organisations who can't afford to release people? And that's something certainly we've been raised with the Department of Further Education in the development of the strategy. And we'll also be bringing up with the Department of Business and Enterprise, Trade and Employment when we see now what's in the strategy and moving forward. But then there are other issues for people. For example, child and elder care. That's usually, if you go back to the ETBs, out of sort of work times and talk about here maybe in the evenings. Transport costs can be an issue too if it's not brought to your venue, which is why it's so good that the workplace program is usually, if not in the workplace, it's near the workplace so people can get to it. And then issues income support is very linked to paid learning leave there as well. And even simple things like technology supports. Lots of learners don't have access to constant broadband and Wi-Fi. Do they have a tablet at home or a device that they can use to brush up on their skills? So again, these supports really do need to be looked at as well. And then finally, progression options. You know, employees, you'd often, over the years and programs I've worked on, they've often said to me, you know, there's no point in just giving me this intervention, as one gentleman put it. It's like opening the door a little bit and giving me something and then shutting the door again if I can't go anywhere else with that. Because anyone that's worked in literacy and not in adult education over the years knows that when people go back and they build their confidence and they begin to learn, they want more. And it's really important that, again, guidance is in place there and that there are bridging or transitioning programs if they're needed, and just a pathway for people to move forward into other programs. So hopefully that's a bit of a summary just around the employee side. Now, what can the employers do? So hopefully for employers that are here today that might have, you know, gained something from the information so far, you think, what can I do? Well, we've got a couple of resources and we're happy to talk in more detail at any stage to any employer and trade union around this. So we have a guide there, even though it was developed a number of years ago, it's still very relevant. The Employer's Guide to Basic Skills at Work, and you'll get that by Googling, and we will be sending the presentation on, as Fergus said. And that's an interesting guide because it does sort of go through again what you can do within your workplace, scanning the environment, becoming aware of possible issues that are there, and then looking at how you might. Skills for Work is one example of an intervention and a support that's available, but there are others as well. So that's a good starting point, that guide. We worked with another guide then over the years called Right from the Start, and that's an interesting guide because that's about sort of you as an organization becoming literacy friendly. So it goes to the other point as well, which is about looking at your customers. So are you delivering all your services in a clear way? Is your website clear? Are you using plain language? So it has another dimension in that, and we're happy to talk more about that as well with anyone that would like to. And then we have a couple of learning resources. And again, Skills for Work and the ETBs have been very good about, they've got some great learning resources developed over the years in catering, I know driving, health and safety. So there's lots out there. We were involved in a couple of, again, they are guides that we would have done a number of years ago, but the content is still in there. So again, just if you're interested, and sometimes when I've worked with employers, I've often said, well, what are you talking about? What type of skills do you mean? What are people struggling with? So the health and safety one there, the steps to safety, is a great example. Just again, Fergus mentioned it very early on about reading a back of a medication label, but can you imagine if you were working in the workplace, and we've spoken to a lot of employers over the years, contract cleaning was one where people would get a new some new cleaning agent would come in and it would be a different so you know, you've worked in things for a while, you know what you mix things with, but a new agent might come and all of a sudden the instruction on the back of the box or the back of the packet is different. And it is really important often that you know what the measurements and the mixtures are on this. And there have been cases, I know in the UK, they'd certainly documented this, where people were using the wrong measurements and the staff themselves were getting very sick. So we you know, really important stuff that's is this literacy and numeracy and digital skills are needed for the workplace. And then obviously when people improve their skills, it has a really great knock-on effect into their personal life, their family life, and social and community life as well. Now we've a link there as well if anyone wants to have a little more look at what we have on workplace basic education, and they can look at that. And then my final slide really is just around looking at the broader sort of literacy, numeracy and digital literacy supports. It's a bit of a summary page too, because you've heard this throughout the session today. So reminding everyone that there are 16 education and training boards who have around over 100 adult literacy centres and services out there, delivering in the main. We've heard from Joanne, the Skills for Work, which is really great program that's available out there. But we also have in the main, what they do deliver are small groups and one-to-one tuition that is free and confidential and is available, as we said, all around the country with trained tutors. And I suppose just to say as well that this is where people can do, often they do it in their, you know, they will ring up and they will arrange for them to go in the evenings, mornings, whatever suits people, and they will stay with the service and work towards accreditation if that's what they choose. There's also another range of options there, and we have the gov.ie / the right course. So again, you can have a look at other pieces in there, and Skills for Work is in there. The Skills to Advance. There's other initiatives that again employers might be interested in looking at. And then finally, then what NALA offers as well, which is available for people where perhaps getting to a service isn't as easy, and they do like to do things online, because we mentioned some of the issues already, fear and stigma and so on. We have an interactive learning website called learnwithnala.ie, where people can go on and engage there. And we have even modules on employability studies at level 3, for example. So again, we'd encourage any employer to have a look at it, because they can then recommend it to their employees, or if anyone here today is interested themselves, they can have a look. And we also have a phone tutoring service. So it's important to say that sometimes people aren't ready to jump straight onto the internet and onto websites. So we will chat to people over the phone when they ring us initially. We will see would they like to go into their local ETB, or if they are not at that stage yet, we can get a tutor to work with them over the phone for a number of weeks, and then we will see where they would like to progress then. So there's lots of options, I suppose, really, to say. That's my summary point really is, you know, I hope that you gained a bit of an insight today about the extent of the issue and the breadth of the issue. And it's not just a quick fix in one sense. We need to be aware of it. We need to be sensitive of the issue. We need to normalise it. And where we can then offer this range of supports. And NALA's here along with the 16 ETBs to help anyone that has any queries. And obviously we'll take any questions now. But after this, if you have nothing springs to mind, please come and contact us and we'll hopefully help you.
Okay, thanks very much, Helen. That was great. Very clear on that there are options out there for employers and employees, and you should explore the options and see what suits you and your employees. So I see it's just after 2. Maybe there's one question, Joanne, I might throw out to you that I can see typed in here from Anne-Marie Egan. Anne-Marie saying, is it difficult to identify literacy needs in the workplace as people may not want their employers to know?
That's so true. I think for the Skills for Work program, it requires a multi-modes of promotion within the workplace. But for some adults within the workplace, they like to come anonymously to courses within the ETBs, or I'm sure to NALA. So they will step forward and come a different route. So for some situations, we organize Skills for Work courses through the employer. And some employees are very happy with that, but some like to come, some like to do the courses within their own time as well, and to do them anonymously from their employer. Remember, you know, we all experience, I suppose, times when we look at our own deficits within the workplace, and for them as well, they don't want to expose themselves. They want to close those gaps and move forward for the job opportunities or the different opportunities that come back. And that's okay too. So in terms of marketing, it requires many modes and many modes in terms of learning as well. So many opportunities. And I suppose that flexibility in terms of provision, so that the courses are just not set up for the one employer, you know, for the employer directly. They can come directly into a course. If it's say computer applications, they can attend that course with other people, you know, possibly without their employer knowing, depending on their situation. It goes back to what we spoke about around the stigma and that journey that they're on in terms of developing their confidence. Some of the learners have no problem speaking about their literacy issues or the negative experience. It's a huge step going back into education. And for some who may possibly have had negative experiences, you know, it's quite a psychological step back into education, because all of those memories of school, regardless of their age, can come up for them. So, you know, I do feel it's such a brave step for many of them coming back into the situation. And the more we can be flexible around the options that we can provide, like that, you know, shift work, accommodating shift work, mornings, afternoons, evenings, you know, managing the shift on a weekly basis, you know, it's trying to, I suppose, look at all of the barriers that are there and provide solutions.
And
Okay.
Joanne, just interesting, Fergus, just on that, remember years ago, we worked on the return to learning program in the local authorities. So what was really interesting there was so we went and we met with in particular, it was the general operatives was the name of people at the time. We're out chat to them. And what they really liked about the return to learning was that the person talking about the new class, the return to learning, was not somebody from their workplace. So it wasn't the HR department, it wasn't the training department, it was this outside person, which was an ETB employee in the sense. So I think it's really interesting how, you're right, it's how it's approached, it's sensitive. We wouldn't suggest that any employer goes back to employees and starts saying, hey, anyone need a hand now with it, like there are ways to broach this. And again, we've lots of supports, and the Skills for Work team can work with any employer on that. But I think the fact that you go into workplaces, Joanne, makes a real difference, that you're outside as such.
And often it's not the formalized settings. It may be just sitting in the canteen and having the chat with people, and that people can make the decision themselves to come forward or not. You know, they can contact via email, they can contact in many ways, but you know, if the connection is made, I think building the relationship is an important part of that, and having those genuine kind of authentic conversations around, you know, the difficulties and moving forward.
Okay, Joanne, thanks a million. Helen, thanks. Unfortunately, it's 2:05, so we're going to have to call a halt on further questions. I see a lot of people have typed in excellent presentation, well done, very informative. So it just leaves me to thank my colleagues, Aoife, Tina and Helen for great presentations. And most of all, I'd like to thank Joanne Power, Joanne, the Skills for Work Coordinator in Waterford and Wexford ETB, for a fantastic input as well. So thank you, Joanne. Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Tina. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. I hope you got something from it. As Helen said at the beginning, I'll forward on a copy of the PowerPoint in PDF form to everybody. So if anyone wants to get contact details from anyone else in their area, the Education and Training Board in their area, you can contact me and I can give you the relevant contact details of the person who might be able to help you. Okay, listen, bye-bye everyone, and thanks again.
Thanks, Fergus.
Thank you. No, thanks all.
Joanne, I'll give you a call for a debrief at some stage.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.